There was a day, you probably remember it, when something was wrong. You weren't doing anything dramatic. You were just outside, moving slower than usual. Maybe sitting somewhere you don't normally sit. Maybe just standing at the window longer than you needed to. And the bird came closer than it ever had before. You probably didn't think much of it at the time. You were distracted. You were inside whatever you were feeling. But some part you noticed. Because you're here now. And that moment stayed with you in a way you never fully explained. What happened that day was not a coincidence. It was not your imagination. What the bird was responding to was real, measurable, documented, and far more specific than most people ever find out. Today we're going into exactly what it was detecting. And by the end, you will understand that moment completely. And it will mean something different to you than it did before. And the bird came closer than it ever had before. Welcome back to Backyard Bird Mind. If you're new here, subscribe before you leave, because what you learn today will change the way you think about every quiet moment you've ever shared with a bird outside your window. Here is what we're covering. First, what birds actually detect when a human's behavior changes. Not vaguely, specifically, down to the signals your body produces without you knowing it. Second, the science of what birds do with that information and why their response to a distressed human is different from their response to a calm one. Third, what researchers have documented about birds and grief specifically, because the data here is stranger and more moving than almost anything else in backyard bird science. Stay until the end, because the last thing we cover is the part people tell me they think about for days afterward, and I think you'll understand why. Here is the first thing to understand. When something is wrong with you, your body broadcasts it, not metaphorically, physically, in signals that travel outward through the air around you, and that birds, with their extraordinary sensory systems, are specifically built to detect. Start with movement. A human in emotional distress moves differently. The research on this comes not from bird science originally, but from predator-prey behavioral studies. When an animal, including a human, is experiencing stress, grief, or low arousal states like sadness or exhaustion, the movement pattern changes in ways that are measurable and cross-species readable. Movements become slower. Reaction times lengthen. The micro-movements that a body makes constantly, the small postural adjustments, the shifts in weight, the reflexive turns of the head, all decrease in frequency and amplitude. To a bird, this profile looks like something specific. It looks like stillness. And stillness, in the behavioral vocabulary of a bird assessing a human, is the single strongest signal of non-threat. A bird's threat assessment system is tuned, above almost everything else, to sudden movement, to unpredictability, to the behavioral signature of a predator about to act. When a human moves slowly, remains still for long periods, keeps their gaze unfocused and downward, every threat metric in the bird's assessment drops simultaneously. You are not trying to be non-threatening that day. You are simply not capable of the kind of movement that registers as danger. And the bird read that with perfect accuracy. But movement is only the beginning of what it was detecting. Birds are acoustic animals in a way humans rarely appreciate fully. Their auditory system processes sound with a resolution and a speed that exceeds ours in almost every meaningful way. Where a human can distinguish sounds separated by about 1/20 th of a second, many songbirds can distinguish sounds separated by 1/200th of a second. They hear 10 times the temporal detail we do. What this means for your yard is this. Every sound you make carries information the bird is processing at a resolution you cannot imagine. Not just loud sounds, not just intentional sounds, the particular rhythm of your footsteps, the way your breathing changes when you're calm versus alert, the sound of your door opening, the sound of you sitting down on a step. Research on bird responses to human vocal tone, conducted as part of broader studies on domesticated and semi-wild bird cognition, has found that birds distinguish not just between voices, but between emotional registers within the same voice. A calm, low, slow voice produces measurably different behavioral responses than a sharp, high, fast voice from the same person. The bird is not understanding your words. It is reading your acoustic signature the way a musician reads a key change. Immediately, completely. On a day when something is wrong, your acoustic profile changes. Your voice, if you speak at all, drops in pitch and slows in rhythm. Your footsteps lose their purposeful cadence. Even your breathing, slower, deeper, less frequent, produces a sound pattern the bird has never associated with threat. You were broadcasting something that day. You just didn't know what frequency it was on. The bird knew. Here is where it becomes extraordinary. Birds do not simply detect a change in a human's behavioral profile and file it away. They respond to it. And the nature of that response has been documented in ways that genuinely surprised the researchers who first observed it. A study on wild robins in residential garden environments in the United Kingdom, published in the journal Animal Cognition, tracked the approach distances of individual birds toward specific humans over extended periods. What the researchers found was that birds did not maintain a fixed approach distance with familiar humans. The distance varied, and one of the variables it varied with was the behavioral state of the human. On days when the familiar human moved slowly, remained still for longer periods, and produced the low arousal acoustic profile associated with sadness or exhaustion, the birds approached closer. Measurably, consistently closer. The researchers were careful about their interpretation. They did not claim the birds understood human emotion in the way another human would. What they said was this: the birds were responding to a specific behavioral profile that, in their assessment system, indicated reduced threat and increased safety. And they were moving toward it. But here's the part that complicates that clean explanation. The birds that approached closest on low arousal days were not random birds from the garden. They were the birds that had the most established individual relationship with that specific human. The birds with the longest history of positive interaction. The ones that knew them. Strangers did not approach closer when a person was sad. The birds that knew them did. That is not simply threat assessment. That is something that requires a more careful word. Let me tell you what the research actually shows, because this is where people tell me they have to stop and sit with it for a moment. In 2022, a team of researchers studying human-animal bonds in residential environments documented something they had not set out to study. In interviews with participants about their relationships with garden birds, a recurring pattern emerged that was strong enough that the researchers felt it warranted specific attention. People who had experienced significant loss, the death of a spouse, a child, a close friend, reported with unusual consistency that birds had behaved differently around them in the period following that loss. Not differently in a vague, retrospective, grief-colored way. Differently in specific, observable, behavioral terms. Birds approached closer. Birds stayed longer. Birds that had been cautious became calm. Birds appeared at windows at unusual times and remained there. There is one more layer to this, and this is the one I want you to carry with you. Every interaction you have ever had with a bird in your yard has been recorded, not stored vaguely, not held as a general impression, but built into a specific behavioral model of you as an individual. Your movement patterns, your acoustic signature, the rhythm of your appearances, the reliability of the food, the history of every moment you were calm, every morning you were present, every time the feeder was full when they arrived. That model includes the version of you that exists when something is wrong. The bird that came closer that day had data. It had weeks or months of you moving at a certain speed, sounding a certain way, appearing at certain times. And on that day, something in the model didn't match. The variable shifted, and the bird, with its extraordinary sensory precision, detected the shift and responded to it. You did not have to ask for that. You did not have to do anything. The relationship that made it possible had been built in the ordinary mornings, in the slow movements, in the feeder being full, in the patience that you probably never thought of as patience because it was just what you did. The bird came closer because it knew you, and it knew you because you had, without realizing it, given it everything it needed to build that knowledge. The cardinal at your window, the chickadee that lands closer than it used to, the robin that stays on the lawn while you sit outside. They are not decorations. They are not background. They are individuals with files on you that are more detailed than you knew, built from evidence you didn't know you were leaving. And on the days when something is wrong, on the days when you're slower, quieter, stiller than usual, they will come closer. Because in their assessment, the version of you that is sad is the version of you that is most safe. There is something in that worth sitting with. You did not have to ask for that. You did not have to do anything. The relationship that made it possible had been built in the ordinary mornings, in the slow movements, in the feeder being full, in the patience that you probably never thought of as patience because it was just what you did. The bird came closer because it knew you, and it knew you because you had, without realizing it, given it everything it needed to build that knowledge. The cardinal at your window, the chickadee that lands closer than it used to, the robin that stays on the lawn while you sit outside. They are not decorations. They are not background. They are individuals with files on you that are more detailed than you knew, built from evidence you didn't know you were leaving. And on the days when something is wrong, on the days when you're slower, quieter, stiller than usual, they will come closer. Because in their assessment, the version of you that is sad is the version of you that is most safe. There is something in that worth sitting with. Tell me in the comments, was there a day when a bird came closer than usual and you knew, without being able to explain it, that something about that moment was different? What were you going through? What was the bird? I want to know the exact moment. I read every one. I'll see you in the next one.